I'm so glad you guys can't hear that banging because like in the background I can just hear this constant tapping like they're nailing something into the wall. I don't usually have sound problems. Okay, is everyone ready? Ready. All right, I'm going to start the webinar and let people come in now. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give about a minute to make sure everyone has time to come in, and then we'll get started. While you're waiting, you can say hello in the chat, maybe share where you're joining us from today. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're giving just a minute for everyone to come in. Please feel free to say hi in the chat and share where you're from. Let's take a look and see. We have people joining from all over Pennsylvania, Indiana University, Tampa, Ohio, Missouri, New York, Virginia, Florida. They're going so fast I can't keep up. Texas A&M, welcome everybody. We'll get started in just 1 second. I just want to give people a chance to come in. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Can you go to the next slide? I guess I should introduce myself first. I'm Katie Weston. I'm the program manager for the Partnership for Food Safety Education. So welcome to today's webinar. Just really quickly, we have a couple slides before we get started. Today's lineup, we'll have some housekeeping, then we'll do food safety and food as medicine programs with Tabitha Benefield, creating food safety community gardens and nutrition access programs with Jenn Parlin, and then resources for food safety programs with myself. And then we'll have a Q&A at the very end with all of the speakers. So as we're going along, feel free to join the chat, but please make sure you put any questions for us into the Q&A box. That's where we'll check for those questions at the end of the webinar. So please use the Q&A box for questions, and then everything else can go in the chat. Next slide. So CEUs, we are offering 1-hour CEUs from ANFP and InCheck today. Please note that we did apply to offer CDR credits, but they recently made some changes to their policies, and unfortunately, we weren't able to meet the new requirements for this webinar without lowering the quality of our webinar. So we are going to keep working on ways to support our nutrition and dietetic educators, but for today, we won't be offering CEUs from CDR. For those that are doing the ANFP and InCheck CEUs, you can get those certificates lots of places. We'll be putting them in the chat box. They'll go in the follow-up email. They'll be on the website. And if you're InCheck, you need to have the online questionnaire completed by October 14th. So if you aren't familiar with the partnership, we're a network of about 13,000 health and food safety educators, about 14 partners, and we have liaisons with CDC, FDA, and USDA. And our goal is to work together to advance science-based, trusted, consistent food safety health messaging. And the reason why we're all here today, every year in the US, 1 in 6 people, or about 48 million, get sick from foodborne illness. 128,000 are hospitalized, and unfortunately 3,000 die from eating contaminated food. So this is a very important topic. We want to make sure to prevent those illnesses. Next slide. We have a conference coming up, the 2025 Consumer Food Safety Education Conference. This is the only conference in the US that's for consumer food safety education. It will be March 13th through 14th in Houston. And there's a discounted rate right now. So if you might be interested, get your registration in by September 2nd for that. And you can visit cfsec.org to find out more and register. We are currently accepting abstracts for the conference. The deadline for submission is Monday, September 2nd. Sessions are focused on 4 different tracks: research, food safety programs or campaigns in action, interactive presentations, demos, and experiences, or for posters only, food safety education strategies and successes. So, next slide. Okay, really quickly, we have just a little poll for you to see who might be attending the conference. Let me get that poll started. Okay, we'll give you just about 60 seconds to enter the poll, to answer the poll. Do you plan to attend the 2025 Consumer Food Safety Education Conference? The options are: I've already registered, I'm planning to attend, maybe or not sure yet, no, we don't have the budget, or no, I'm not interested. So I'll give about 30 more seconds for you to get your answers in. Okay. I'm getting ready to end the poll, so go really fast if you haven't answered yet. Okay, let's see the results. It looks like 1%, a very small number, have already registered. 2% planning to attend, lots of people that aren't sure yet and don't have the budget, and about 19% that aren't interested. So thank you for taking that poll, and we'll go ahead and get started with our presentations. So first, I would like to introduce you to Tabitha Benefield. She is an RDN and the Manager of Nutrition, Health, and Well-Being at FMI, the Food Industry Association. Welcome, Tabitha.
Thanks.
And I'll go on.
And thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Really, if we could just go back one really quickly, I just wanted to give kind of a bit of a grounding of what FMI is, or who FMI is, just in case there are some folks on the line who don't know. So FMI represents food retailers and their suppliers to advance a safer, healthier, and more efficient supply chain. We bring together a wide range of members across the value chain, from retailers that sell to consumers to producers that supply the food and other products. And as well, as a variety of companies providing critical services to the food service industry. FMI also collaborates with government to help the food industry provide safe and nutritious and affordable food and beverage options in the communities across the country, and to develop policies aimed at supporting those who are hungry or impacted by food-related chronic disease, or both. Through many different projects at FMI, year-round, we explore consumer perspectives, industry progress, and initiatives in areas related to nutrition and public health, with a focus on the important role that the food industry plays in this ever-evolving and increasingly important space. One such important role is food as medicine. To ground our conversation, we will define food as medicine. We'll discuss the diversity of food as medicine program settings and how food safety principles and practices are paramount in the execution, delivery, and success of food as medicine programs. So we can go to the next slide. So you may ask, how is a food retail setting an avenue for food as medicine programs? So let's just talk briefly. I just want to highlight briefly how the food industry plays a significant role in advancing nutrition and health and well-being. Specifically, the grocery store provides a unique opportunity to address gaps in healthcare, improve public health, and meet consumer demands for nutrition, health and well-being services. Consumers' perspectives are quickly evolving, and the grocery stores are becoming more important destinations for health and well-being. The food industry is pursuing a wide range of initiatives to meet the needs of both consumers and employees, including raising awareness about health and social benefits of family meals, expanding product and fresh food departments allocations in retail stores, and then advancing food as medicine programs that connect nutrition and food to health. So next slide. So very quickly, I just want to define food as medicine. And so as you hear about these programs and basically how they're built, the hope is that you will be able to illuminate where to enact core food safety principles and critical control points to reduce foodborne illnesses. So the broad definition of food as medicine is a reaffirmation that food and nutrition play a role in sustaining health, preventing disease, and as a therapy for those with conditions or in situations that are responsive to changes in their diet. Within this definition, there are 4 areas that are included that kind of help build that definition of food as medicine. And essentially, food as medicine is a philosophy where food and nutrition aids individuals through intervention that supports their health and well-being. So those 4 focus areas of that definition is that food is used as a preventative medicine to encourage health and well-being. Food as medicine in disease management and treatment. So food is used as medicine in disease management and treatment. And then food as medicine to improve nutrition security. And then finally, food as medicine to promote food safety. Next slide. So where else will we find food as medicine programs? We often find food as medicine programs in a variety of places. We've already talked about the grocery store and the retail food setting. We'll also find food as medicine programs in community-based organizations. You may find them in faith-based organizations. Those community and faith-based organizations may work in tandem. You'll also see them see food as medicine programs in organizations that their whole purpose is to make sure that everyone is food secure. So you may see food as medicine programs in organizations like Meals on Wheels. And then also you may find food as medicine programs, or at least you may see government funding for food as medicine programs too. So there are some government involvement with regards of helping food as medicine programs become available to all. And a lot of food as medicine programs operate outside of the food retail setting. Similarly, they may not refer to them or their programs as actual food as medicine initiatives. So one really, actually everybody kind of may already know this, but one such program that is not really actually considered a food as medicine program, but by definition fits all the boxes, is the Women, Infants, and Children program. So if you think about WIC and you think about who it serves and the reason that it's there, it's actually there to make sure that pregnant women, postpartum women, and breastfeeding women are secure, and those children ages from birth to 5 years old are nutritionally sound too. And so we've kind of gone through that already, but in the framework, you can see that you can basically lay this framework that's outlined in the slide on top of any of the settings that we've talked about. The graphic here is specific to the food retail setting, but as you can see with regard to food prescription programs and produce programs, you may see all of these things in various settings. And when you see those things, you can actually consider them food as medicine programs. Next slide. So this particular graphic, if you remember a few graphics ago, looks very much like the broad definition of food as medicine. But what's really great is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics took the original definition and then expanded it to really kind of outline what food as medicine looks like in a retail setting. So the retail setting, much like many other settings, provides an opportunity for registered dietitians and pharmacists to address gaps in health equity or healthcare equity, and also to improve public health and to meet consumer demands for health and well-being services. In the community-based organization settings, you may find that there may be health professionals, and then they're like registered dietitians. But then what's really unique about the community-based organizations and their programs is that they're trusted community members. They usually also offer some type of health services. And most often it's very much nutrition and health focused as a continuum of care for those who may be suffering with any type of illness or chronic disease. And then the last place you may find some of these food as medicine programs are in specialized private practices and private companies. And those entities may offer ready-made meals like medically tailored meals or medically tailored groceries, and other services that you can have specialized and individualized results. Next slide. So a little bit about food as medicine in the community. So I wanted to try and break down each setting because they are very unique. While a lot of the framework exists across all of the settings, with food as medicine in the community, you will most often see these programs set up as food pharmacy or produce prescription programs. And usually what that involves is there's a community organization and they have partnered with some type of healthcare organization, whether that's a health center, a dialysis or a kidney or dialysis organization, or health center. And usually that partnership, the work is equally divided. So the healthcare organization may bring the quote unquote pharmacy to the food pharmacy, while our food system organizations such as a food bank, a food pantry, or urban ag organization may take care of fulfilling the food. And so when I say urban agriculture organization, I mean like a farm. So maybe a local farm in the area may decide to supply the produce for the produce prescription programs. And then a lot of times they work in tandem to ensure that the healthcare professionals that are there, they want to track, they want to make sure that the program is working as desired. And so the healthcare organization will normally take blood pressures. In some instances where diabetes is a focus, they may record your hemoglobin A1C, maybe even your weight. And then they'll keep a record of that data so that they can then measure the data again at a later date to see if there was any improvement in the health status or nutrition status of that individual. Next slide. So food as medicine has expanded, and I just touched on this slightly, but in another place where you can find food as medicine programs or benefits or offerings is kind of in the private company sector. And so you'll see that medically tailored meals are offered often in the community setting, like the Meals on Wheels that we talked about, organizations like Meals on Wheels and senior services organizations. But you can actually also jump into the food as medicine space as a consumer by purchasing or applying to programs that offer medically tailored meals. And so a medically tailored meal is a therapeutic food that is basically put together to improve health and the nutrition status of an individual. You may see this as a meal kit. You may see this as an individual entree, very similar to kind of what you may see in the grocery store, something you can pick up and take with you. And the great thing about a lot of these programs is that while some folks can pay for them out of pocket, there's usually an option to have these medically tailored meals covered by your insurance if you have to help manage a chronic condition. And then additionally, they may provide other benefits like one-on-one counseling and things like that. One thing that I did forget to mention about the community, food as medicine in the community setting, is that a lot of times these folks who are able to participate in food as medicine programs, they may receive like a voucher, they may receive a card. It's some type of way of redeeming the produce or redeeming the food that they're able to receive. And so those two programs even though they are very similar in terms of making sure people have enough fruits and veggies throughout the week, or to have a meal that has controlled carbohydrate or protein, etc. There are many avenues to how individuals can actually take advantage of these programs. Next slide. So food as medicine populations are the vulnerable food safety populations. And I thought of different ways of saying this, but it's actually the truth. For every population that we know about in terms of where food safety is paramount, that actually are the same populations that are being served by food as medicine programs. A lot of food as medicine programs are widely available to seniors or anybody 65 years and older. We talked a little bit about programs that are specific to children, but we know that anyone under the age of 5 is more susceptible to foodborne illness, as well as pregnant people, and then people who have who have weakened immune systems, or who have chronic conditions, chronic health conditions that are treated by medicine. That core group that we already know about that are vulnerable to foodborne illnesses are quite often a lot of the same individuals who are participating and taking advantage of food as medicine programs. And so when looking for the populations to address, we already know the populations and the folks that we need to look out for to address those issues. And as I wrap up, keeping your food safe. So we know that food safety plays a vital role. When folks are getting those food as medicine meals delivered, we want to ask questions about what's being delivered, what's coming, how it should be stored. We definitely want to schedule a time where we are available or someone is available to make sure we can receive that food and that it's kept in a safe place for delivery. We want to examine the package. We want to examine the items. If we have a thermometer, we want to check and make sure that our cold food is coming in cold. And if we have any warm food, who's to say our meal may be hot and ready for us, that it comes in hot. Hand washing, clean surfaces, utensils are all part of making sure that when you're actually going to prepare those meals, you are able to do that safely. And then if you're receiving a medically tailored meal, something that's already prepared, an entree of some sort, you want to follow all of the storage and preparation recommendations to make sure that that food is kept safe. So while it was safe in wherever it was prepared, we wanted to make sure that it continues to be safe by making sure we're properly storing it and properly preparing it by those recommendations. And so in a nutshell, that is food as medicine and food safety and food as medicine. And so a few quick resources, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. If you had any questions for Tabitha, go ahead and add those into the Q&A. After all the presentations, we'll answer the questions. So before I turn it over to Jenn, we do have one more quick poll. We'll just give about a minute. Has your organization participated in food as medicine or nutrition access programs? Yes, frequently, sometimes, rarely, never, and not sure. And again, we'll just give like maybe 45 more seconds to answer that. So go ahead and get your answers in. Okay, maybe 10 more seconds. Get the answers in quick if you haven't done so. And I am going to end the poll. So it looks like 27% of you are frequently participating in these types of programs, 16% sometimes, 6% rarely, 19% never, and 31% not sure. So it seems like a pretty even mix between often and never or not sure. Okay. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jenn. Jenn is Managing Director of the Garden Kitchen at the University of Arizona Pima County Cooperative Extension. Welcome, Jenn.
Thanks so much, Katie, and thanks everyone for having me today. I'm going to talk about creating some food-safe community gardens and nutrition access programs. I wanted to give a little context about the programming that I'm involved in. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Garden Kitchen. We're a seed to table whole health program that works primarily in policy systems and environmental changes to provide equitable health choices for lower resourced communities. We have a facility that is in the city of South Tucson, and fun fact, the city of South Tucson is completely surrounded by Greater Tucson. So we are a very small city, 1.1 square miles within a very large city. We have a facility that contains an educational garden. We have a teaching kitchen, think really souped up home economics, a commercial kitchen, and it is also the home base for our mobile produce market. We provide support to about 35 different community gardens in our county, and we have a wide variety of settings that is in. So 0 to 5 at early childhood, all the way to senior settings with senior housing or community centers. We're also the statewide trainers for food demonstrations for Arizona Department of Health Services, and that includes WIC and SNAP Ed staff. Next slide. So what's important when thinking about starting or maintaining a food safe garden? And please feel free to share your knowledge in the chat. I would love for you all to be able to benefit from each other. Oftentimes, I think people learn more from each other than from me in these presentations. So if you already have some ways that you ensure food safety in your garden, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I did want to say, caveat, this is really about making your garden food safe. There are a lot of other factors in making sure that your garden is successful. And so we're just concentrating on the food safe part of it today. But oftentimes, if you haven't started your garden yet, it's a really great opportunity to start thinking about food safety while you're planning for it. If food access or food education or something where you're having edibles in your garden is part of the why of why you have a garden, right? Why is this not a playground? Why is it not a walking trail or a splash pad or something like that? Then talking about food safety right up front is really an important place to start. I think it's easier to get buy-in from everybody in the beginning and then integrate this food safety plan into the larger garden plan. No worries if you've already started your garden. I would sit with the folks that have some stake in the garden, are interested in the garden, and talk about if there are changes needed, if you're doing a great job and you want to make it a standard operating procedure, whatever that is. It is a good idea to review and think about food safety in your garden in an ongoing kind of way. It gives the ability to everyone to have ownership over the food safety in the garden. And then that helps us to make sure that food safety is really more often maintained. So for today, we're going to talk about location, water, soil, the containers that you're gardening in, animal and pest management, and people management. The location's really important when thinking about food safety. So we're gonna think about what could our garden come in contact with from above and below and beside and all of those different places. So consider runoff. I have a picture of a roof here. We don't necessarily want roof runoff to get into our edibles garden. Think about the things that are on your roof. You know, maybe I have birds on my roof. There could be storms, there could be chemicals from the roofing agent that is on there. We don't want any of that to get into the garden. We also want to think about runoff from below or beside the garden. So thinking about animal cages that are being cleaned out, or street runoff, or your compost pile. We don't want any of those things to be able to run into the garden. We also want to think about a location that is, if you can, be close to hand washing. It is easier to have folks wash their hands very often in the garden if the location is close to a hand washing station. Next slide. We also want to think about our water. So we are all about sustainability. We want to be able to use harvested water, gray water, all of those different things. but we want to make sure it's really safe for our edibles garden. If you are collecting rainwater that is not coming off of a roof, great, use that in the edibles garden. If you're collecting it from a roof or something else that could have contaminants on it, better to use that water on our edibles trees or our shade trees or our non-edible plants. Gray water that's used from like laundry or something like that, make sure you're using a biodegradable soap for sure. And then think about, where are you going to use that water? Also make sure that you are not using water that has heavy amounts of contaminants in it. So I'm thinking about paint. Maybe you're cleaning up from an art project at a school. You don't want to use that water that has paint in it, or we're cleaning out our terrarium or something like that. We don't want to put any of that into the edibles garden. Next slide. This is a picture of early childhood gardens that we installed. They are open on the bottom. And so even if you have, like we did, put some different soil into the bed and you have an open bottom, you want to make sure you're testing that soil for contaminants. Test the soil also if you plan to do a sunken bed or you're doing something in the native soil. Make sure that you're paying attention to that. You can check with your state health department or your local extension office, and they should be able to help you find where you can get that soil tested. We also want to make sure that we are buying compost and soil from reputable sources, right? We're making sure that they've followed all the food safety guidelines for composting, for where they're getting their soil, how they're sourcing their materials, so that we bring that in and it's already food safe for our garden. A note about composting. At our facility, it's rather challenging for us to get the compost to be hot composting. And so we don't use our cold compost in our edibles garden. Cold composting oftentimes does not reach a temperature to be able to kill off pathogens. We do compost, but we just use it more so to make sure that our food scraps are not going into the landfill, which is also a great way to use compost. Next slide. Also, recycling containers is wonderful, but just be thoughtful about what that container had in it prior or what it could leach into your soil. We have some used tires here in this picture, so be really thoughtful about using tires. We don't really want to use used tires or railway ties or something like that in a garden bed that has edibles. You can certainly use it for your flowers or any of those kinds of things that you would like. We also live in a very, very hot climate. And so using plastic containers outside, sometimes those can degrade and flick plastic into the soil and then contaminate the soil. So be careful about what the container is that you're going to use when you're going to use it. If you're going to use old containers that are plastic, generally we want those to be food containers. We don't want it to be something that had chemicals in it previously. And then keep an eye on them throughout your season, or use them inside maybe to start your seeds. Next slide. This is one of our chickens. She's in a coop with her sisters. We want to make sure that she is not allowed into the edibles garden. We also want to make sure that other animals like pets and wild animals are kept out of the garden as much as possible. This really has to do with your location too. So thinking about, in terms of your location, how are you going to have the least amount of pests and wild animals and other animals coming through your edibles garden. If you do have pests, make sure to treat those as soon as possible with food safe methods, right? We're not going to spray Raid onto our edibles garden or anything like that. Or you can look up integrated pest management, ways to deal with those pests. There are lots of ways to do that in a food safe manner, but you do want to make sure that you're treating them as soon as possible. People management, this is a big one. Like I had said before, certainly try to be somewhere that it's easy to wash hands. If you're not by a building, potentially you can do a gravity flow hand washing system just with a container that has a spigot on it, and you can look up gravity flow hand washing containers online, and you'll be able to see that whole setup. But you want to make sure that people have the opportunity and that they are washing their hands before and after they're in the garden. Hands should also be washed when we're switching jobs from dealing with the compost or animals or something like that. We want to make sure that we're again washing our hands before we go into the edibles garden. Some folks don't know that things aren't just going to biodegrade in a good way. And so they might be tempted to throw some food scraps or dump liquids into the garden or something like that. Be sure to educate everyone and make sure that those things are not coming into your edibles garden. Certainly, if folks are sick, we want to make sure that they are not participating in the edibles garden while they're not feeling well. They could do something like trimming the shade trees or something else and still be part of that garden day. But we want to make sure that they're not working in the edibles garden, specifically in harvesting the food. And then we want to make sure, as always, to wash all of our foods after harvesting and before tasting them. So that wraps up my garden talk. Now we're going to talk a little bit about food safe nutrition access programs. This is a picture of our mobile produce market. We have a refrigerated van, so it keeps everything cool, not like cold enough like a refrigerator, like eggs and butter and things like that, but cool enough so that our produce does not wilt in the summertime. In addition to that, we're going to talk about food sourcing, the chain of custody, the location of your access program, and then people again. So for your food sourcing, just as we talked about with the soil and compost for your garden, you want to make sure that you're buying from reputable suppliers or accessing this food from somewhere reputable, like a wholesaler or something like that. Make sure that you find out about their food safety practices, especially if you are working with some emergency food programs. Make sure that their volunteers are trained in food safety. Oftentimes, we all rely on so many wonderful volunteers, but they may not have the education in food safety that they need to have to ensure that this food continues to be safe. I've heard of some instances of frozen things being left out for a long time, or refrigerator things sitting on a dock in the sun for a long time and then being put into the refrigerator. And so if you're not aware that those things could be happening and are not part of training, then you're going to get the milk that's cold and think that it's fine, but it could have been sitting out in the sun for a long time and not actually be food safe. We really want to make sure that we're trying to buy local as much as we can, but certainly ask, even at the farmer's market, what kind of food safety protocols do they have in place where they're growing their foods? Oftentimes, those are challenging to make sure that you're doing all of the things to stay within guidelines. And so, in my experience, folks have been pretty happy to talk about what they're doing, even at a farmer's market, how they're ensuring this food safety. We really want to think about this because, especially ready to eat foods, things that we're not going to cook, if there's E. coli on the lettuce when you purchase it, it's going to be very difficult to get that E. coli off if you're just making a salad with that lettuce. Next slide. This is some of my team. I bet you can guess what year or years this picture was taken in. But this is our commercial kitchen, and I wanted to show we're in a clean space. We all have aprons on. We all have our hair covered. At this point, we were all wearing masks. We want to think about the chain of custody as the unbroken path from wherever that food was grown all the way till it reaches the consumer. And so think about Think about these things and ask yourself, has that food been handled properly all the way through? So wherever you picked it up, was it safe during that transport? Has it been stored safely? And then does the consumer have the ability to get it home safely too? Has it been stored at food safe temperatures? Tabitha talked about cold foods cold and hot foods hot. Be sure that that's happening in your food access program. And then we want to make sure that we are good stewards of the food. And so we're keeping the food, if we are keeping it for a length of time, in a very food safe location. Next slide. This is a photo of us at our mobile market. You can see we're under a tent. This is a particularly nice day out, and so we just have the tent cover up. If you are going to be outside or even inside, make sure that you're thinking about the same things you thought about in the garden. What could come into contact with the food from above, from the sides, from below, and make sure you're stopping those things. If you have rain or wind or anything like that, you'll want to have sides on a tent if you're outside, and then also a floor, especially if it's muddy or there's splash opportunity, things like that. Particularly when you are doing food samples or handing out ready to eat foods, you'll want to make sure that they are very covered and protected from environmental contaminants when you are outside, but even inside. When we leave our commercial kitchen, we generally try to put a lid on whatever the food sample is, take it in a cooler or in a hot holding situation to wherever we are, and then if you are able to give the consumer that food sample with the top on so that when they take that top off, they're immediately eating it. The next slide, this is a little sweet human that comes to our mobile market, and you can see that's a tomato in her hands right there. She loves to taste the food. And sometimes if her caregiver is not watching close enough, she wants to put that food back so that other folks can have a turn at it too. Very sweet, but also we want to make sure that that's not happening in our food access programs. So think about protecting that food from unwashed hands, folks that might be sick and they're coughing or something like that. And then the potential little hands that wanted to taste something, or the big hands, and then put that back. Again, as always, I don't think we can stress it enough, but make sure people are washing their hands before touching food, in between switching jobs, if they are writing things down, if they're gathering information about people at the food access program, helping people out to their car, make sure that they are washing their hands again before they come back to be in contact with the food. That's it. Thank you so much. This is our website if you wanted to learn more about the programming or get in touch with us later.
Thanks so much, Jen. And again, quick reminder, if you have questions, you can go ahead and add them to the Q&A box, and we'll get to those at the end. So if you weren't on at the very start, I'm Katie Weston. I'm the program manager for the Partnership for Food Safety Education. And we just wanted to share some resources with you that could be helpful when you're working with healthy eating programs and food as medicine programs. So very first, the core 4 food safety practices: clean, separate, cook, and chill. And these can be used in any program you're doing that has to do with food. At fightback.org, we have all kinds of resources that are about the core 4 food practices. We have detailed fact sheet flyers for each step: clean, separate, cook, and chill. We have a safe temperature chart that has the meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs, the recommended temperatures for consumers. So make sure you're using those thermometers. And then we have a brochure that's in English and Spanish that kind of simplifies everything and can be handed out at events. That has links to things like the USDA meat and poultry hotline. It covers those core 4 steps, and it even has that temperature chart in there. Hand washing, and Jen stressed this so much, how important hand washing is. We have a page just for hand washing that you can visit, and we have clean hands, healthy home graphics that could be printed out and posted up. near hand washing stations or sinks and restrooms. There's also a keeping a clean scene video. This is just like a short video. It's only a couple of minutes long on the importance of washing hands and keeping those food prep surfaces clean and the steps to do that. There's also some other resources like social media posts that you could share if you're doing stuff online. Safe produce. So of course, if you're doing a community garden or any other program that involves fresh produce, you can use these resources. We call this campaign Produce Pro. Be a pro at handling your produce. So there's all kinds of brochures here and flyers, graphics, social media content. There's even PowerPoint presentations. So if you're doing a class, like let's say you're doing a community garden and you want to prep all of your volunteers, you could use that PowerPoint presentation. There's signage that you can print out and post up places. And the graphics are really neat. They go through all the steps for produce: check, clean, rinse, separate. Go 40 or below. So again, our other speakers stress the importance of keeping hot foods hot and cold foods cold. These are resources on maintaining your home refrigerator at 40 below. It's one of the most effective ways to reduce foodborne illness. And we have brochures in English and Spanish. And some are particular to vulnerable populations. We have some of these brochures that are for expecting parents and for adults over 65 who are at a higher risk of foodborne illness. There's a fact sheet that really goes into the science behind the messages. If people are asking, why do you recommend this? You could share that with them. Food safety myth busters. These are some fun graphics that can be printed or can be shared online. Each graphic, they're kind of tiny, so each one has a food safety myth that people might have heard, and then it gives the fact and then some of the details about the fact, why that myth isn't true and some of the science behind it. I think there's about 30 of these available. There's lots of topics, including some that might be relevant to these programs. There's cleaning and sanitizing, fruits and veggies, meat and poultry, fridge and freezer, several topics. You can check those out. Poultry handling. So if you're running a program that involves meat, we have some safe poultry resources you could check out. Don't Wing It is specifically on reducing the risk of salmonella and campylobacter. And it has brochures, again, that are specific to vulnerable populations, such as older adults and parents of young children. There's infographics and PowerPoints, and it does, again, include that science behind the message. So if people are asking questions, you can share that with them. Don't Wash Your Chicken is a series of videos on chicken handling. There's 4 animated videos, social media messages that go with them, and graphics, and they're really cute. There's one where they like show like a kind of x-ray of all the bacteria that spreads around the kitchen if you rinse your poultry in the sink. So those are available again on fightback.org. The Safe Recipes Style Guide is for so if you are offering a food safety program that includes recipes, you might want to think about using this resource. It's a standardized guideline for adding food safety steps to a recipe. So it includes things like remembering to rinse your produce, washing your hands before you touch food. It's very easy and simple to use. And multiple studies have shown that when consumers have these recipes with the basic food safety steps, they're more likely to practice good food safety behaviors. We do have some other resources around the Safe Recipe Style Guide. If you're working with students or kids, there's a safe recipe activity for middle school and high school. So it walks them through how to add recipes, safe steps to a recipe. We also have already pre-made recipes if you're looking for some. And I have seen a few educators that use these for farmers markets and things like that. They'll feature a recipe that uses one of the ingredients that they have, like If they're doing apples, they might have an apple recipe, and then they put the food safety steps in there. Okay, so we will go to the Q&A now. If you haven't already added your questions to the Q&A box, please go ahead and do that. We might not see them if they're in the chat, so make sure you're putting those into the Q&A box. And you can ask questions for all of us, for me, for Jenn, or for Tabitha. We have quite a few in here, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think this first one is for Tabitha. In talking to my community, I haven't really had positive feedback on primary care physicians promoting specific vitamin-rich foods for those with specific vitamin deficiencies. Is there a way to increase promotion for this between medicine and grocery? So if you have anything to share about that, Tabitha, or Jenn, if you do too, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so it can be hard to get physicians and other providers on board, but usually, you know, as a registered dietitian, if I have anybody who has a specific deficiency, putting them back with their provider is usually the first step. And if they haven't gotten anything there, I usually just recommend a multivitamin. Not a lot enough folks take a multivitamin regularly to address some of those specific vitamin deficiencies. To your point, absolutely fix a lot of very easy health issues, but it can be hard. But a multivitamin is usually one of the easiest ways to get folks to kind of get to where they need to be in terms of specific vitamin needs. Now, if we're talking about iron and things like that, then we may have to come back to a specialist or a provider to kind of figure out how to go about that supplementation. But just in general, a multivitamin for folks will usually solve the problem. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors kind of goes right over.
Thanks, Tabitha. Okay, this next question is for Jenn. It's a big question. What are the items needed to start a garden?
I would, that is a big question. Not unreasonable though. I would say start small and build on early successes. And so if you're in an organization and you already work 40 hours a week, start very small. Start with a couple of pots. Go to your cooperative extension website. They're going to have really great information on what plants to plant when. So make sure you have enough sunlight, 6 to 8 hours. Make sure that your soil is moist but not wet, that you're planting things in the right season, and that they are covered from elements if they need to be. Like, I probably wouldn't plant seeds right now because it's 110 every day, and it's very unlikely that they're going to be successful. And so I would look in. Cooperative Extension has tons of resources. You should have a cooperative extension office in your county, and they'll be able to give you regionally specific information.
Great advice, Jenn. Thank you. Okay, this question's for Jenn, but I also want to direct it to Tabitha afterwards. Are there any resources you can recommend as a guide for someone who wants to start a community garden in their community? What are the first steps? And then I'll direct it to Tabitha for food as medicine programs. So I'll read that again. Are there any resources you can recommend as a guide for someone who wants to start a community garden in their community? What are the first steps?
There are tons of resources online. And it really depends on the audience and the region and what you're looking for to get out of this community garden. And so I would be pretty specific when you're looking at guides. Is this community garden supposed to be a safe space so that people can feel mentally well? Well, then that's going to look really different than if it's for children to learn how to identify foods, or if it's going to be, it's going to be set up for seniors, or it's going to be set up for children. And so I wouldn't recommend something in specific, but be specific when you're searching online, and then go to your cooperative extension office too and ask them I would also look at the community gardens that are existing in the places that you are already in and see who's successful. Ask them about the mistakes that they made. Ask them about their attendance. Usually people are doing community gardens because they love it and they'll be very happy to talk to you.
Thanks, Jen. And Tabitha, what if someone wants to get started offering a food as medicine program? Where would you recommend they go to, or what resources?
Um, Specifically for food as medicine, when I think about that question, I think about work that I did in the nonprofit world where um, so many where we connected with local farmers and local food. And not only did we volunteer with them, but they also came to the spaces that we were looking at in terms of attempting to grow food to then help mentor us and kind of point us in the right direction. Um, in terms of just kind of growing food to either give out or to continue on in food as medicine programs. But in terms of starting a food as medicine program, I think that one of the best ways to do that is to connect with some of the community resources that are already in the area. So if you have places like recreation centers, health centers, things like that that are maybe nearby where you can have a base for the food as medicine program where folks can come and gather and pick up things and you can kind of assemble things. I think that's a great way to start to just engage it because you want to do it in the community. So you want to engage the community and kind of settle in where you are. And so finding, those key folks in the community that can kind of help push that initiative along and then grabbing local farmers, maybe someone from the health center who may want to be able to volunteer, whether that's a nurse or someone like that who's good at taking blood pressures and some of the other healthcare measures that are usually attached to food as medicine programs. I think that that's a great way to start.
Yeah. Okay, back to Jen. What is the issue with compost needing to be hot produced?
So if your compost is just being cold composting, the heat of the compost pile is really what kills pathogens. And so the issue with cold composting is if there are pathogens present in your compost pile, the cold processing is not going to be able to kill them off. And then you're going to transfer those pathogens into your garden.
For Tabitha, is there an electronic presentation of the food as medicine?
As in a recording?
I'm not sure. That's all I have for the question. I can't say from our end if you're asking about the PowerPoints that we'll share those with everyone afterwards. Okay. Let's see. Okay, this could be sorting through the questions. I lost the one I was going to ask. Either of you are welcome to answer this one. Are there any standards being promoted for medically tailored meals, or is it up to the vendor?
So with medically tailored meals, it's usually specific to the disease or the chronic condition. And so the stipulations kind of this the how they put the medically tailored meal together really is going to depend on what kind of chronic disease or issue you may have. And so if we're talking about someone who's a diabetic, then we're looking at something that may not have, that may have no more than about 15 or 20 grams of protein. It really just all depends on what the chronic condition is. If it's high blood pressure or something that is cardiovascular related, it will most likely be low fat, low sodium. And if it's kidney related, then it may be foods that are not high in fluids, or it may be a multitude of things. It really kind of depends on the chronic disease that we're working with. Because food as medicine also incorporates celiac and gut issues. And so it really kind of just depends on what the person is dealing with. It's kind of how the criteria for that medically tailored meal is set up.
Did you have anything to add, Jen?
No, I think that's perfect.
Great. Okay. Someone asked Jen if you could restate water sources that are not rooftop runoff.
I think that's asking more about water harvesting. And so if your water harvesting is coming from somewhere that's gathering water that is not roof runoff, then that would be okay. If it's just coming from the sky into wherever you're harvesting, that would be fine. Gray water is also fine to use on your edible trees. The trees grow long enough and the water takes such travels in such a way that by the time it gets to the fruit, it's really been cleaned. And so you can use, if you're using laundry or something like that, as long as your soaps are biodegradable, make sure you're using the correct gray water soaps for all of that. And then, you know, your water sources that you would drink from are also fine.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Okay, I think either of you could answer this one. Some people may avoid certain foods due to food safety concerns. Do you have any advice on navigating food safety for people who already have restrictive diets due to chronic diseases?
So yes, is the easy answer to that. It gets harder when you talk about specific chronic diseases or illnesses. I'll just use a very broad, I'll just use cancer as an example. For some people who are going through specific types of treatment or periods within the timeline of treatment, they may not be able to eat any raw foods. Everything that they may have to eat has to be cooked because their immune system has been brought down so low by the therapy that they can't run the risk of having a food that has not been heated, cooked, and brought up to proper temperature. So these are really good questions, but they're kind of hard because it really actually depends on what specifically is happening with that individual, at what time, what's happening with them, when and where they are maybe in their care. That's really going to be specific to what they're going to eat and how it may be prepared.
Okay, I see quite a few questions about slides and CEUs. So I want to go ahead and answer those. The PowerPoint slides will be shared after the webinar, as will the CEU information. You'll get all of that in a follow-up email. It will also be posted on fightback.org under recorded webinars. So it might take us a couple days to get it up there, but you'll also get everything in the email. So you can get your CEUs and a copy of the slides that way. Okay, we'll do just a few more questions here. There's so many questions. Do Meals on Wheels programs meet food as medicine criteria? If either of you know the answer to that question.
So Meals on Wheels have different programs. And one such program that they offer is medically tailored meal. So yes, is the answer to your question. However, all of them may not, all Meals on Wheels organizations or locations may not offer medically tailored meals, but some do. And it is a specific program underneath the umbrella of Meals on Wheels.
Jenn, are you doing a session at NEAFCF's conference? Someone asked that.
I am. It's in my hometown. We're running it. We're running the conference this year. So I will be hosting the food safety in-depth session, and I'm also presenting in the concurrent sessions for our mobile market.
Awesome. Hopefully some of the people on this webinar will see you there. Okay. Do you think people would need to be a dietitian or nutritionist to provide a food as medicine program, or could health educators or other public health professionals be able to provide services as well?
So this is a great question. A lot of times you'll find registered dietitians behind the scenes. So you may not see a registered dietitian on site the day you may go to your food as medicine program, whatever that may look like. But a dietitian may have been in the room when putting together the bag or the meals or the produce for that individual who may be diabetic or who may have high blood pressure or cardiovascular disease or renal disease or celiac or all those different things. And so usually that's how we would prefer it to go, that the registered dietitian is consulted in some way, if not on site, to be able to deliver like one-on-one services. However, the best food as medicine programs have a dietitian on site for folks who may have questions, like you all have questions about what they're getting that week, what they should do with it, how they should prepare it, or questions that they may have come up from the week before. So, a top tier, A plus 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 food as medicine program will have a dietitian that's really involved and can also talk with the folks who are in the program. But most all food as medicine programs have a dietitian incorporated in some way, either with the formulation of education or recipe standardization and checking all those recipes and things like that.
Thank you. So I want to end with just one final question on a positive note. You've both worked in these types of programs. What are some of the benefits you've seen from them? Or a positive story you can share from one of these programs? And whoever wants to go first can.
I'll go first since I'm not on mute. All right, so one really great story that I have is that you may not have saw it in the slides, but when I was a registered dietitian in the community, we sought to do an 8-week cooking program for individuals who really just wanted to beef up their cooking skills and cook more at home. Well, we had this woman join, very mature woman, who we knew could cook, but we were kind of like, why are you here in this cooking class? And she had been diagnosed with diabetes, and she was trying to figure out how to do better at home. And she took the cooking class, and her A1C came down, and her weight came down, and she bought 7 other people from her swim class that she took at the rec to also join the class, because she knew that a lot of other folks were having these issues. And so while that particular initiative wasn't set out to be a food as medicine program, what we did is from that experience, we were able to then set up and stand up a food as medicine program that actually tackled all those things that folks were coming to just the cooking class with. It was literally just the cooking class. It wasn't anything special about it. We just said, come cook with us. We're teaching, basically culinary fundamentals. And that's how that happened. So that's my feel good story.
Wow, that's a great story. And Jip?
I think that there's so many great stories, but I think about food as medicine and food access oftentimes in the same arena, right? And so we do a lot of preventative things in our programming. So being able to bring a mobile market to somewhere that does not generally have access to fresh local produce has been really great. People are really responsive. They're excited to eat these fruits and vegetables, to cook with these fruits and vegetables. And I think as a side benefit, people really have started to share their familial stories with each other about those ingredients, about recipes that they would use with these ingredients. And so not only are we nourishing the physical body, but we're also thinking about the mind and the spirit, and we're getting health benefits for all of those different aspects while we're at the mobile market.
Thank you both for sharing those successes and answering all the questions. Thank you everyone for the wonderful questions. We have just a few quick wrap-up slides and then we will end the webinar. So coming up at the partnership, September is National Food Safety Education Month. September 18th, we'll be hosting a collective day of action. So mark that date in your calendar and keep an eye out for communications about that. And October 15th will be Global Hand Washing Day. So it's a perfect day to talk about the importance of hand washing. Okay, big thank you to our community connectors that help make these webinars possible. Next slide, we also want to thank our partners. Again, they're there who help us make all these resources and webinars free for all of you. Next slide. If you want to help support our efforts, you can make a charitable gift. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Make sure you're on our bi-weekly e-card. We also have newsletters, a couple other newsletters, Lasting Lessons, which is for educators of K through 12, and Cooking Times gives you a recipe and a food safety tip once a month. That one's really fun. And then final reminder about the CEUs, because I did see a lot of questions about that. For this webinar, we are offering CEUs from A&FP and InCheck. You can get those in the follow-up email or at fightback.org. You go to the free resources tab and then recorded webinars. If you're seeking the InCheck, make sure you fill out that form by October 14th. And I believe that's it. Thank you everyone so much for this wonderful webinar and for joining us. Thanks again, Jenn and Tabitha. Bye, everybody.